this is the roguelike that I'm developing, which is out on early access on Steam right now, and about a month and a half ago when I made my last update, I added a super cool overworld to the game to really show off the Paper Mario inspired graphics, but there was just one problem. Well, it's a bit lonely walking around all alone, isn't it? So what I did was I added pets, and while they do follow you in the overworld, they also have a huge impact on the combat. But before I get into that, I'll explain some of the other new additions that I made to the pet update, and it's all live on Steam on the beta branch right now. And okay, the biggest change other than the addition of the pets is the addition of a third act to the game. And so an act is kind of like a section of a run, and until now, Soul Stalker only had 2 acts, and so the runs were about 15 to 20 minutes long, which feels really nice compared to other games in this genre, since sometimes they can get less interesting near the end because the player already has their build fully defined, but there is still so much time left of the run. But Soul Stalker actually had the entirely opposite issue, which is that sometimes it would feel like your runs were cut short before you could really tie up your build. But now with the addition of Act 3, the pacing feels absolutely perfect. And what's cool is that while before the map screens were always the same between acts, now they actually differ. So here's what the Act 1 map looks like, and it's the same as before, and it's a bit plain, right, because it's the first one. And here is what the Act 3 screen looks like. So it's a lot more sinister, and the visuals match those of the combat areas as well. And since we're talking so much about Act 3, I thought I would mention that I also added tons of new enemies for this final act, and you can see some of them on screen right now. But I also added a new elite, and this one is super special because it was actually designed by one of the game's Kickstarter backers. And it's actually not the only Kickstarter design thing in this video. And if you're a bit newer to the channel, you might not know that Soul Stalker actually had a Kickstarter campaign last year, and among the many rewards that allowed players to leave their own footprint on the game, one of them was to create an enemy for it. And so this is Shadow Vitas, which is one of the Act 3 elites, and it does something super unique among all the elites in the game, which is it can actually teleport. And this adds some really nice complexity to combats that the game doesn't really have prior to Act 3, and it works really well with the extra power that you get going into the final act with all that time you get to power up. But one thing you might be wondering is, why is the character called Shadow Vitas, and is there such a thing as a regular Vitas? And funnily enough, there is. Again, through the Kickstarter rewards, the backer guided the creation of a character, and this is what they look like. And its special ability is that it deals more damage the longer you stay still, so it really incentivizes you to have a really unique playstyle. Another character that I added in this update is also designed by a Kickstarter backer, and it's called Sultan the Cat. And this one's actually one of my favorite ones from a gameplay perspective because it starts out really weak, but all stat modifiers are increased, so you get this dynamic where the character feels really hard to use at first, but it's super versatile, so your build by the end of a run can be really crazy. And then the final character that I added in this update, I'm actually not going to talk about because I wanted to keep it a bit of a surprise, but it was actually designed a few years ago for the previous game that I made, but it ended up being unused, and so we revisited the design for Soul Stalker, and it turned out really great. So shoutouts to Clay for designing that character a few years ago, and credits to Tim who designed the concept for the other 2 characters and animated and illustrated all 3 as well. What I will tell you about this character though is that it actually boosts your pet's efficacy in some ways, so I think this is the perfect moment to talk about the key part of this update, which is of course the pets. So how they work is that you can use the game's currency, which is called souls, and you can purchase them, and that's it basically. That's how you get them. Pretty simple, right? But once you do purchase them, you can equip them like a weapon or trinket, and they'll follow you around in the overworld, but you'll notice that they also have specific bonuses when you're buying them, and these are the ones for combat, so let me show you how these work. So this pet here is called Smelton, and it's a sentient ice cream cone, and it actually comes from one of the projects that Tim, the artist, made for himself, so this here is a bit of a neat crossover. Its functionality is that it follows you around in combat, and then any attack that it does deals extra damage to enemies that have the frost status effect. So this pet works really well with ice focused builds. Then here's another pet, and it's just a dog, but we needed to have one of course because, you know, it's the pet update, and it throws shurikens at enemies. And I know it's kind of random, but I just thought the idea of a dog lobbing shurikens with its mouth was just kind of funny, you know? So I think it works in a weird kind of way. Then the last pet I'm going to show you is called Jerry, and it's not really a pet, right? It's just a guy. But again, I just thought it was kind of funny to call it a pet instead of a companion, and I think it works. But what this one does is actually nothing in combat. It just increases how much money you make, but it's by really actually quite drastic amount. So most pets do actually have in-combat functionality, and when you upgrade your own character in combat, the pets also get upgraded, but some others only give you stat bonuses, and then there's a few others that also give you a mix of the two, so they're quite versatile. In total at the moment there are 18 of them, so really just so many to drop into one update, but I'm super happy with how they turned out, and they add another layer to the combat and progression of the game. But apart from all this pet stuff, the game has evolved quite a bit visually as well, but I need some help deciding whether one feature relating to that should actually make it into the game or not. Before I get to that, let me show you some of the new areas that I made that you can find throughout your runs, and this is the visual update that I was talking about. So this one's one of my favorite ones, and it's kind of like an underground farming station with geysers surrounding it. And then here's the Act 3 combat area, which of course looks pretty similar to the map screen that I showed earlier in the video. And then finally, here's a kind of cool Japanese-inspired town at night. And that makes the perfect segue, because that feature that I was referring to that I needed help is a day-night system. So usually I like to make generalized systems for my games and share them where it makes sense, and I made a day-night system for my other game, Synth Beast, and to test out how flexible it was, I implemented it into Soulstalker. And so this is what it looks like, and I'm actually super happy with it, but the thing is, I'm not actually entirely sure how to actually implement it, and I could make it such that there's like a random chance that the overworld is at night instead of during the day, but I wanted to see if there was maybe a more creative way of approaching this, so if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. One thing that I do want to limit though is that it probably should stay as a feature only for the overworld, since the combat arenas have all very fine-tuned visuals, and making them all have potential day and night variations might limit how visually distinct I can make them. Another thing that I implemented into this update was the final boss of the game, so a pretty big deal, but I'm actually not going to include it in this video, and instead I'll cover that in the next one. So if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe and you won't miss it. But you know what's crazier than waiting for the next video to see the final boss? Actually going and playing the game right now, because you can actually play this update on Steam right now, and you can get the game for $4, and I actually put it on discount just for this update, so go to the description and you can check it out. It's one of the most content-dense updates in the entire early access period so far. But I am actually going to cover one more thing in this trailer, and I actually recorded 70 gigabytes worth of footage for this, so I hope you enjoy it, and it's actually a new trailer to revamp the Steam page, so here it is. So that's it for this video, and if you want to watch the previous updates devlog, click on the video on screen and make sure to subscribe and get Soulstalker. The link is in the description. See y'all next time. Bye.